Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Moore with Sennheiser, and you're joining the Don't Stop the Education series from Sennheiser Sound Academy. Today, we'll have the Monitor Mixing Masterclass, and we have some special guests today. But first, I'd like to introduce my co-host, Andy Egerton, who'll be helping me with this project, and we're going to get started here. So from the U.S., we have a couple guests, or actually three guests from the U.S. First off, we have Brad Baisley from Nashville.
Hello.
We have Andre Williams from New York.
Hello, how you guys doing?
And Landon Storey, also from Nashville.
Good morning.
And then Andy's brought some great guests from the UK, and I'll let Andy introduce those guys. And here's my co-host, Andy.
Hello, yes, I'm Andy Egerton, from the UK. We're all actually from Yorkshire. So we've got Alex Cerutti, currently residing in Oxford, and Charles Chopper Bradley, who's up in Wakefield there.
All right.
So yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. Really appreciate it. I'm going to hand back to Tim now.
Yeah, we'd really like to thank everyone who's joining us on this webinar. This is our first time doing this type of situation with a bunch of engineers, and we really want to make this a chat about, you know, how we all approach and monitoring and mixing from a professional level. All of us here are either current engineers or past engineers who work for Sennheiser. So please look at this as you just walked into a festival and we're all sitting at catering having a discussion about what we do. We think this will be fun for everyone, and it'll be a very nice conversation for the next 90 minutes. So we want to go around the room and let the guys make introductions of who they are, what they do, and what their history is. And I'm going to turn it over to Andy to take it from there.
Okay, so I guess first, as I look at my screen, I guess we'll go first to Alex Cerutti, please. If you can give us a little 2 or 3 minutes about yourself.
Yeah, hi. So I've been doing this properly for a good 15 years now. I moved down to London from Yorkshire, where I'm from, getting on for 12 years now. I was to work for Britannia Road Productions in London. And since then, kind of working for them, touring with them, mixing bands. I'm currently working for a young British artist called Lipa. In the past, I've worked for people like Lana Del Rey, Mumford & Sons, various other people. Yeah, I only mix monitors now, pretty much. I haven't done front of house in about 10 years. Certainly haven't touched a PA box in about 10 years. And yeah, pretty much all in ears. Haven't seen a wedge for a while either.
That must be nice.
The same for a lot of people these days.
Well, thank you, Alex. That's fantastic. And I guess we'll stay in the UK and go down to Charles, please.
Hi, everybody. My name's Charles Bradley, also known as Chopper. I've been doing this since 1994 as a full-time job. Started originally in a nightclub, actually, up here in sunny Yorkshire, looking after bands that used to come through. So old sort of 60s bands used to come through on the sort of theatre club circuit, to local cover bands and all that kind of stuff. Did my first proper tour sort of the summer of 94, 95. And that was it, really. Built my way up through the ranks, as it were. Currently now mixing monitors for Harry Styles, his second album. Previous to that, spent about 12 years mixing Duran Duran, other people, Annie Lennox, Massive Attack, all that kind of stuff. Again, I haven't seen a wedge for a considerable amount of time. Pretty much just in ears. The odd front of house gig every now and again is a little favour to a buddy, but that's just about it, really.
That's fantastic. And
Nice.
let's head over to the US then, and let's go with Landon, please. If you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name is Landon Storey. Originally from Texas. I moved to Nashville in 2004. Got into touring pretty quickly after that. Actually, always kind of been a monitor guy on the regional level, and then moved to Nashville looking for a big first opportunity. And As many of us know, usually monitor gigs can be hired by the artist. And my first opportunity was actually as a systems guy with Rascal Flatts, and jumped in doing that, hanging old, refrigerator-sized sound image boxes, and saw a really big change in the industry with things being remote controlled over networks, and kind of got really interested in that for a few years, did that for about 7 years. And then through a common label mate management connection, got my first opportunity to do kind of a up and comer country, little baby country act, Easton Corbin, and then kind of took off from there, and then got married and got off the road for a few years doing installs, commercial AV stuff, and then got lured back in through just getting opportunity to go pop and to completely change gears and go into a different genre. So it was exciting and really kind of challenged me the last few years. Just got off a big international tour with Khalid, this young kid that's just exploded from when he was 19 to now. I think he's just turned 22. So he's been blowing up, and I've learned a lot.
Fantastic. Thank you, Landon. And let's jump across to Brad, please.
Hey guys, I'm Brad Baisley. Came to Nashville about 1998 to go to college for audio. I'd been doing some live audio in high school before that. Went to college for recording, and just after college was in the right place at the right time to jump into the digital console revolution. And almost immediately, because I was familiar with digital platforms, got monitor mixing gigs right off the bat. I started with a guy named Clint Black. Recently, for the past 8 years, I've been the monitor engineer for Blake Shelton from The Voice. I've also been last year mixing the 90s rock band Better Than Ezra some. With Blake, it's a mixture of in-ears and wedges. Blake doesn't use in-ears at all, so he's on wedges, but the rest of the band is on in-ears.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brad. And then last but not least, Andre.
Hey, I'm Andre Williams from New York, born in the Caribbean. I do monitors for A$AP Rocky, Summer Walker. Started off doing monitors for Patti LaBelle. That was definitely my first ever major gig in the industry. And I do both in-ears and wedges. That's a little bit about me.
Thank you, mate. Okay, so because we're going to cater, we want to cater for kind of novices who might not know much about monitoring, monitor mixing, or in-ears or anything like that. We're just going to quickly give a overview of that, and then we'll jump into a few questions and hopefully a little bit of education about how these superb guys that we've got here kind of go around doing it. So obviously floor wedges, floor monitors, whatever you want to call them, are speakers on the stage, but essentially it's for the artists to be able to hear themselves and hear and monitor their performance on stage. Obviously in-ear monitors now, they wear the little in-ear monitors in their ears, and they have a little pack on their body, which is a receiver. These guys, obviously through the mixing desk, make the mix, which goes to the transmitter out to the artist, and they can monitor exactly what they're doing. So I guess taken from that, Tim, I think you've got the first question that you'd like to put to the panelists.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that comes to mind, and a question that always came to me when I was out mixing, is when you first encounter someone who's making their foray into the transition from wedges to going to in-ears, and the difference of approach that they as a musician or a vocalist or an artist needs to take is different. And it's also different for you as an engineer. And I know part of that's communication, but I'd really like to focus.
I think we've lost him there, but I think what he was going to say was he'd like to kind of focus on how you guys would take an artist who's maybe new to in-ears and start building a mix from complete scratch. So I'm going to jump to Andre first of all for that one.
First, I will definitely have a sit down with the artists before even starting with the in-ears, explaining to them the difference between what the in-ears bring to the game than over the wedges, which is, I think you get a much more closer encounter with the music. It seems closer to you, and you can hear everything at definitely in front of your face, say, instead of the wedges. Sometimes you move away and you can't hear it because the wedges is not covering the whole stage, or you don't have enough wedges to cover the whole stage. So you're always going to be hearing the same thing constantly. So that will definitely be my first conversation with them.
That's a great answer. And let's just jump over to Brad. Have you got anything to add there, Brad?
Well, if we're talking about a singer, which usually the main artist is a singer, I like to always just start getting their vocal sounding right. I don't even worry about what the band's going to sound like. So I'll get them to put their in-ears in and get the mic sounding the way they like to sound. It might want it to sound, and then figure out where an acceptable loudness level is. I really encourage people to only listen as loud as they need to listen, but not any louder, because you can really mess things up if you just try to listen way too loud. You can bring up all the ambience and just make your ears tired. So I usually start there. We'll talk about if they want to have a little bit of reverb or not. And that's usually where I'll start, is getting their vocal to sound right, and then build around that.
Yeah, that's a similar experience as well. Landon, have you got any different?
Yeah, I think what we do and what makes us so different as modern engineers is building a trust and building that relational aspect of what we do. A lot of people are musicians and they've never communicated with frequencies or things, so they're intimidated to begin with. And I think building that trust and that and developing a sense of communication in their own words can make them as comfortable as they can be from the beginning. And then I agree with Brad, like getting their vocal to sound as natural as it can, because they're not used to hearing their head voice being closed off and hearing that thicker sound and being sealed off. And even little things like the pressure in your middle ear when you're hitting certain notes or certain instruments can feel bizarre at first, and if they don't have a vocabulary to communicate certain things to you, it can make your job harder, and it can make them frustrated. So I think that's a big thing of explaining the kind of giving them a heads up as far as what to expect when they put them in from the beginning. And then some things come with experience, like understanding how certain levels or things can affect their own pitch reference. You know, if something's too quiet, they might sing flat, or if something's a little bit louder, you can hear them straining, trying to sing over that volume that they're trying to compensate for. So a little bit that comes with experience of knowing, like, and over time getting to know the artist you're working for, and knowing when they're comfortable, when they're not comfortable. And one of the huge advantages of in-ears is talking with them about placement left to right in a stereo image of where do you want the click track to be? Do you want it in center, or do you want it off just barely, you know, just a little bit of a pan can make a huge difference as far as just panning a click just off of to get it away from that vocal or a guitar part, and just think about how, you know, kind of communicate with them in a left to right perspective of how they want to hear things. And it can make a huge difference as far as making things punch out or making them hear what they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess obviously one thing with in-ears as well, the way that productions are moving as well now, is a lot of people are playing to a click track. So obviously being able to have the click that you don't want blaring through a wedge is kind of a huge advantage to that as well with using in-ear monitoring. But let's just jump to Alex and see how he'd set up an initial mix for a new artist.
So one of the things that I try and do when people have never used in-ears before, especially custom in-ears, is get them to wear them on the train or, you know, at another point so that they get used to moving their jaw and moving their mouth around when they've got these lumps of plastic filling their ear canals. And as people have said, their instrument needs to sound right to them. If it doesn't sound right, and be it their voice or their guitar or whatever, you're going to just start off on a bad foot, and it's just going to be hard work. So getting those fundamental things correct in the first place, then you can worry about the rest of the band and the whatever kind of niceties that you might not think about when you're mixing wedges, or people have done for them in the past when they haven't had somebody that's going to make effort and pay attention to actually what they need. As far as click tracks go, I think it's just trying to get people not to listen to them at deafening levels, so that they actually play as a band rather than a various number of individual musicians just playing to separate click tracks. Obviously some musicians are worse at this than others, but certainly I find with drummers they can happily make themselves go deaf over a very short amount of time by having a click track at unbearable levels. And if you don't control that, A, their playing doesn't get any better for it, and B, all they're doing is losing their hearing. And to be fair, the same can be said for vocalists. We've all worked with vocalists that insist on having their voices at levels that probably aren't very good for their hearing. And it's about making making sensible choices to keep them healthy and keep their hearing healthy, because nobody needs to be deafening people, and it can happen quite quickly over not a long time. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. And last but not least, let's jump to Chopper and see how you'd approach this situation.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much a blend of what everybody else has just said. I think fundamentally, volume on a pack, as like a good starting volume, is quite a critical conversation to have with an artist. And then moving on from there, again, making sure their principal instrument, be it their voice, be it the drums, be it the guitar, make sure they're happy with it, and to try and make things sound as natural in their heads as you can possibly get. Quite often when an artist has only listened to wedges, because of the physicalities of having to deal with feedback or room acoustics and all the rest of the stuff, they're probably not used to hearing their voice in such a clear and sort of plain, isolated manner as they get through an in-ear pack. And I think another thing to be really conscious of it and to have a really good chat with an artist about is to let us guys do the volumes, and not have the artist constantly reaching for their pack, to turn their voice up because they've just, you're playing a particular song or some part of the song's kicked in, their voice may be a little bit quieter than they want, they crank their pack up, and then all of a sudden, you kick into the middle eight or something, and everyone's eyes are rolling in the backs of their heads. So it's just kind of sort of laying out the fundamentals, I think, explaining how things work, explaining, a good route of communication between the engineer and the artist on stage. Again, once people are on in-ears, you've got added functionality where, as an engineer, you can speak directly to the artist or anyone on stage straight into their ears. You can have a conversation. You can give them a little microphone on stage. We have a chat mic on stage for most of the artists in the Harry band. A lot of it is because of the distances, to stage and sight lines, but it gives everybody clearer communication. There's that sort of winking and nodding, and it just improves everybody's I think sense of ease when they're on stage, knowing that they can get what they want straight away.
Yeah, thank you guys. That's brilliant. There's a couple of questions coming in. So from Angelos, he's asking mono or stereo in-ears. So I'm going to let one of you jump in there, whoever wants to answer that one.
I'll take that if you want.
Go on then.
I would say always stereo. As we were just saying, having the ability to give stereo gives you another dimension to the mix. So as well as creating room within a mix via EQ or compression, you've also now, with the stereo mix, got the ability to spatially track things around in someone's head. And because you're hearing things directly into your ears and you're not hearing things coming from the floor or from, you know, a PA rig or a guitar rig or whatever, being able to move, you know, simple things like panning people's vocal mics around in relation to where people are stood on stage gives them also then a sense of direction and a sense of physicality within a band as a whole, rather than a person just stood in the middle of the stage with everything hammering down the center of their head.
Yeah, that's great. We've got another question here. Ashish, who's asking that he's recently started working as a monitor engineer, and he's facing issues with a mix of all the different musicians having different in-ear molds. So again, this isn't for branding or anything, but generally, is that something that you'd recommend, that everyone has the same type of in-ears, be it generic or molds, or the same kind of brand, or is using different ones? How would you overcome that issue?
I think it definitely helps, especially if you're not an experienced monitor mixer, or also if the band you're mixing is not experienced and can't tell you what they like things to sound like. I think it really helps to either be on the same model or at least like the same brand. I find that certain brands of in-ear monitors have their own sound signature compared to other brands. But if you get more advanced, you can use output equalization to make different in-ear monitors sound the same. Or if you have a person that wants a specific sound signature that is maybe different than what other people want, it's not the worst thing to be on different in-ear monitors, but I think it helps to have everybody on the same flavor. Yeah,
definitely. That's great, guys. Tim, did you have any questions you want to jump in with there?
No, actually, you jumped into what I was going to say. I mean, we have a ton of questions coming in, and that's awesome. So we're going to try to get to as many of these as we can as we go through the discussion. We're going to keep an eye on them for everybody out there watching, and try to put them into the right spots of where they come in. So please know that we're seeing them. The volume of questions, the quantity is great. So we'll do our best to get as many of these in as we can. So thank you.
So I'm going to jump back in with one of these questions, actually, and it's, how do you deal with a vocalist who tends to use one ear in and one ear out? Has anyone got an experience of this situation? I see Brad waving his fist there. I know I have. But does someone want to jump on that one? Andre, Brad's ready. Go on.
I'm gonna let somebody else field how they deal with it. I'm just gonna say I give the artist what they want. If they're writing my check and that's what they want to do, I'll discourage it, but I'll do whatever they want to do.
Yeah. And Andre, I'll let you chip in there.
That's like a new common norm now. Everybody's taking one ear out. But if it's like a singer per se, I find out what their fundamentals are, what definitely do they want to hear. And that will be the thing that I'm driving in that one ear that they have in. And everything else, like I try to do a combination of side fills and ears at least. So everything else, I'll try to put in the side fills per se.
Yep. So they've at least got some monitoring there. Yeah. Anyone else got a one ear in, one ear out artist? Because you do see it now. It's quite common. What do you think that they're trying to achieve by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things you got to figure out is why they feel that they need one ear in and one ear out. Personally, I try and discourage it as strongly as possible. For no other reason than you can end up, if you have a loud volume on stage, you can end up driving the pack a lot harder for the one ear, And you know, your body, no matter whether it's your ears or your hands or your legs or whatever, your body strives to be in balance all the time. So if you're on a loud stage and you've only got one ear in, you're going to instantly have to run that ear louder than you would if you had two in. And that, you know, that's not healthy for anybody. You know, I think fundamentally for a safety point of view, as far as, you know, monitoring levels go, you know, it's a big thing for me. I would discourage it as strongly as possible.
Yeah.
Yep. Andy, I had I'm going to go back in time here, but I had a challenging artist one time who was doing the one ear thing, and the way I was able to get around it was to say, let's test some new mic capsules, and just start with the mic only, and let him go through some capsules and listen, but put both ears in so he could hear what those capsules sounded like. And then I brought the band on stage in the middle of it, and then turned the band up under him, and he never took his other ear out again, because he already had some ambience going on, and he didn't have too much going on in his mix to start with. It was kind of like a trick, but you know, it's different people. It's hard to get around them sometimes, but it worked in this case. But I always noticed when the packs came back to me with one ear that they were twice as loud, or, you know, 3 numbers louder than if they went out with 2.
Yeah. Okay, so that leads me to another question then. So if an artist is pulling one ear out, it's probably because they feel disconnected from the room, maybe. So encouraging them to wear 2 ears in, which obviously everyone agrees on. How can you make that feel more of a natural mix and put a bit of air into it, maybe, or make them feel as that they're part of the room, if you like? So I'll go to Alex for that one.
I've found it depends, because if you're working with a band that the music itself is quite loud, there's not a lot of room there for, say, audio mics during the song. But what I have done occasionally is to insert a reverb with no pre-delay, maybe 1 second reverb tail over the whole mix, just so that everything isn't sitting in front of them. It is a little bit of depth to it, so you're just giving it a little bit more room to move, so it doesn't feel quite as isolating. And then when the song ends, you can add audience mics in to get the response of the audience, rather than trying to fight putting audience mics in during a song where you're getting reflections back off the PA and you're getting reflections of everything else. That's just going to make everything a little too muddy, a little bit too inaudible. In different styles of music kind of lead to different things. I know when I've worked with like straight up rock bands, one trick that worked really well was to stick a pair of condenser microphones kind of left and right of the stage, generally making a kind of like stage overhead, so you get everything in, and feeding a little bit of that in, essentially to do the same, give the same effect of like inserting a reverb over it, but kind of you'll hear a little bit more guitar on the right hand side because that's where the guitar cab is. That's worked quite well. But generally I try and avoid just leaving audience mics on all the time, because I don't think it works very well. But saying that, I might have just done it wrong.
Well, this is it. It sounds subjective, isn't it? There's a lot of people
Right.
saying that on the questions now, so I don't think there is some right or wrong things. Sorry.
Oh, I think I was going to add to that. I think
yeah,
a side effect of inserting a whatever platform you're on, inserting a reverb on each individual band member to have a sense of consistency, like doing a fly date, going from an arena to a theater to a outdoor amphitheater situation. If you have that similar sound they're used to, that's kind of that comfortable bed they're used to sitting in, and then you introduce the room sound on top of that, it can make your job easier of going from sound check of an empty room, an arena, whatever, having that kind of baseline that they're used to, and then adding ambience either in song breaks in between for applause or whatever. That can really make your job more a lot easier going from different environments, you know, big arenas, stadiums to whatever, just kind of, and especially if it's on board and it's the same every time you load your show file, no matter where you are in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Tim, did you want to jump in there? So,
I actually did. It was I was just commenting on how many questions we were having. We're trying to keep up with those while the conversation's going here. So
have you got a few pulled out that you'd like to ask?
no, actually, when I sent you that, it was the ones you just jumped on. So we're good so far.
Okay, cool. That's
So
good.
sorry about that.
So it's, I guess one thing that we could jump onto then is how, because I know Alex mentioned it before, and also it's we're obviously mixing for the in-ears for the artist, but there's 2 engineers at the gig, so obviously you've got a guy out front there. So let's just talk a little about the relationship between a front of house engineer, maybe where he would want a microphone, and where for in-ears maybe you would want a microphone, and how you kind of work together to sort of achieve that that balance where everyone's happy. I guess we'll go to Andre first for that one.
I think for me, I work with 2 main front of house guys a lot, Brandon and Burton, right? And they always take my take on a lot of things, on my position of microphones. So I never really run into the issue bickering back and forth with a front of house guy per se, because I think at the least, one of the guys definitely is the one holding the show in their hands per se, because if we mess up, the artists mess up, then the audience don't have a good show, right?
Yeah.
And we don't want who basically take care of the front of house guy. Like if there's a buzz, if there's any issues on stage, we need to fix it before it even get to them.
Yeah.
So I'm always finding me working with front of house guys always take my take on a lot of things.
That's cool. Landon, do you have a similar experience, or how do you work around it?
I think I haven't run into mic placement suggestions as much as more as like the mic selection, and within reason, I think the last few tours I've been on, traveling internationally, has been kind of at the forefront of like, what can I get in certain countries? But if a front of house guy has we all like to experiment and tinker. So if they have their mind set on something specific, as long as it's not something that's going to adversely affect, bring in too much ambience or something that's going to affect a large percentage of what's coming from the stage. I actually usually defer to the front of house guy as far as what they're looking for. And like that kind of, I think a lot of what no matter what we're talking about is understanding what they're trying to do out front, and have them understand how it affects you on stage. That seems to be the similar conversation that we always have of like, I don't mind trying the new shiny thing if that's what you want to do, but let's see what it's like in rehearsals, and let's see how it affects me on stage and you out front, and if it's delivering the end game of what you wanted to try that for in the first place.
Yeah. Chopper?
Yeah, I mean, I would kind of agree with that, actually. I usually defer to front of house. Mic placements, I would usually let the front of house guy sort of have first pick. And then if something's not working for us on stage, or it's causing a particular issue, then we'd have a chat about it. Vocal capsules would normally be the one thing that I have some sort of opinion on, be it because for us on stage the capsule's too wide and we're picking up too much stage noise or screaming girls or whatever it may be. Or obviously we hear the capsule really directly in our ears, whereas they've got 100 or so feet of room between them and us. So we can hear some characteristics that they may not be hearing in a room or in a large PA, which may be we don't like, or the artist doesn't like, or they can hear themselves, you know, too breathy or too, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it's always around, you know, it's a good chat. But I'm in a similar position where I kind of work with the, you know, the same one or two front of house guys. So we've you know, I've got a 15-year, 20-year working relationship with most of the people I work with. So it's never really an issue.
Right. And let's jump to Alex as well for that one.
Yeah, just to kind of go along with the same. I've always gone with the front of house guy. Kind of gets the first pick, with, as Chopper said, with the exception of vocal mics. There's been very few occasions I can think of, certainly in recent times, where I've had to do anything drastic. The only time I can think of is when an artist specifically asked for something to be done that was purely for them. And so I just added another microphone to deal with that thing that was just for them, and they didn't need it to go out front of house. So generally it's been pretty much just go with what the front of house guy's gone, unless, as I said, it's been that would be detrimental to what I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
I've
Alex.
also worked with good people, so I've not needed to question what they wanted.
That's good. And Brad, similar situation for you?
The front of house guy for Blake, he tells me, I love the guy. He says, y'all just get it to sound good on stage and I'll make it sound good out here. So he gives me pretty free reign with mics and placement. And I try to work with the band members, and we'll start with their equalizers flat and try to get the mics where they sound best flat, and then we'll season them to taste. The only thing that Blake's front of house guy is a little particular about is the vocal capsules, and that's because we always have a long runway that goes out in front of the PA, so he needs something that works good in front of the PA. So that's not always the best sounding microphone for what I'm trying to do on stage, but it has to work for him out front.
Yeah. That's great. We're going to, as part of this series, we're actually going to do some front of house seminars as well. So I'll ask the same question from the other end of the multi-car and see how those answers differ as well. But thanks, guys. That's really useful. I'm going to hand to Tim now. Sorry.
Brad, we should get paid to do the front of house one. That'd be fun.
It would be great.
Yeah. Hey, so I've got a couple really good questions coming in. The first one, I'm going to try to put these not in order of the way they came in, but to try to cover some of the people who maybe do this on a different level. And this is an interesting one, and it's about, I'm a guy at a local venue, and the bands are coming in with in-ears, but being the local guy, they don't have an extra transmitter and pack for me, so to put their mixes together, I'm having to use my Q wedge. Is there any advice you guys can give to, okay, I don't have in-ears, I don't have a transmitter, but I need to service these guys because it's a service gig, but I'm going to use a Q wedge to build their mix? Tough question.
Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead, Brad.
Oh, I would say get the cheapest in-ears that you can afford that are good and plug in the headphone jack on the console. I still do it all the time. If I'm on a fly date and they don't only have enough transmitters for the band and not for me, I'll plug in the headphone jack all the time.
Okay. That's a good one. Anybody else?
I was just going to throw in, if you're in a situation like that and you're not very comfortable with driving in-ears, just be very aware of safety and how quickly things can get away from you, like just small adjustments, especially if you're used to wedges and hearing something on a Q wedge, and if you're not using a pair of in-ears on the headphone jack, you know, the smallest change can be a lot bigger change to them than it is in the Q wedge. And just be very careful of you know, drive very, very slowly when it comes to things like that.
Okay. Anyone else have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say exactly the same thing. You know, making a transition from wedges to in-ears, the first thing you'll notice is the tiniest little movement on a fader or a pop. You can hear instantly. And if that's gained to a mix, you know, you're talking millimeters or fractions of millimeters on a fader move, whereas it may be 1 or 2 millimeters, you know, before you even hear it in a wedge. So definitely, even if you can't afford a set of in-ears, like I would still say, just plug a pair of headphones in, plug a pair of Kansas straight into the headphone output on the desk. You're going to be closer than you're ever going to be trying to hear anything through a speaker.
And I think if you don't have a pair of cans or some in-ears, I think putting the wedge at a shoulder height would definitely help improve a whole lot of what you're hearing than the wedge being on the floor trying to get to you.
Maybe even managing expectations a little bit on their end of like, hey, you know, I'll do this, I'll do whatever you want, but you know, this is what I'm dealing with, and I'm not, you know, maybe not admit that you're not comfortable doing it, but just kind of manage expectations going into that situation, that that you're kind of limited by time and other things to get them, you know, just managing expectations is a big part of that situation. I was doing that locally here in Nashville at a small venue, and kind of had to do that from the beginning.
Right, which managing expectations is a large portion of the monitor gig, right? Okay, let's see. The next one is it's come up. You guys have been talking about one ear in, one ear out, wedges, in ears. This is a popular one. I've got about 7 questions here on this one. How do you manage phase relationship between wedges and the in ears? And then, kind of in the same ballpark, is I've got a drummer with an 18-inch sub, and he says he can never hear the low end in his ears. Is this coming from the sub? So, you know, basically, how do you deal with having live speakers and in-ears at the same time? And I'll take whomever would like to go first.
Go on, I'll jump in. There's 2 answers to that. One, if you can't hear the high end, the low end, sorry, in your ears, it could be down to the particular set of in-ears that you're using and/or the fit. If you're using custom in-ears, the seal in your ear is massively important towards generating a low end. As far as speakers and as far as subs go with drummers, if you've got the choice, maybe try and use a 15-inch or something. Not hearing a sub behind you can be as simple as the wavelength. So the sub's too close, sub's too far away. It could be out of phase, but you know, you would still feel the sub if the phase was slightly out of time with your ears, I would have said.
Okay. Anyone else have a mix of wedges, subs on stage at the same time?
I like to try to only have the low end coming from one source. So if you're trying to get all the low end out of the sub, you can take it out of the in-ears for those channels or overall, because that'll eliminate the possibility for cancellation if it's only coming from one place.
So you're using like a high pass,
Right.
on the channel or on the send.
Right.
Okay. Anyone else? That's a great idea.
I think some of that might be like a lot of things. You can overthink things because you have so many channels coming from the stage and so many reflections going on. Where do you start? You've got either wedges or side fills, or you've got reflections from the PA coming back from seats or the arena. I mean, I'm not discounting that you want it the best you can, but you're kind of fighting your own battle there of what your biggest gains are going to be. And that's kind of where experimenting can come through. Like I've had good experience with the balanced armatures in these ears are so small that they're fighting an uphill battle to begin with, reproducing some of these frequencies sub 50, 60 hertz. And I've had really dramatic results, high passing things, electronic inputs, tracks, keyboards, things that don't need to have those in your ear, you can have dramatic results cleaning up that reproduction in your ear and making more space for other frequencies, especially if they have a sub behind them. You can take it out of their ears and favor that air movement they're looking for anyways. They're not going to get that in their head. And you can really give yourself more dynamic range for other things when you push it off onto a sub, rather than fighting an uphill battle with a balanced armature that can't reproduce that anyways.
Very good.
That's a good one.
Andre,
Sorry.
any question? Anything to add there? Or?
Just jumping back to the questions then, we have 99 questions. So sorry guys, we're not going to get to all of them, but I've lost it now. But I did see one that was basically, do you find that you can be more aggressive with EQ in in-ears than you can with monitors? Obviously, because for the lack of feedback, I guess this is aimed at. So I'm going to jump to Andre. Do you want to take that one?
Definitely. I think with in-ears, you could actually what we call sweeten, like high-end and low-end stuff. You could actually sweeten stuff a little bit more than what you could do in wedges per se before you get to the point of feedback, and add more air to like a vocal mic and stuff like that than what you could add to a wedge. So I definitely pick the in-ear that you could definitely go more aggressive on EQ than what you could do on a wedge.
Yeah, does everyone agree with that, or has anyone got any? Yeah, generally consensus the same. You could do a lot more with EQ through the wedges, through the inners. Sorry, not the edges. Just checking. Sorry, Tim. Did you want to jump back onto something?
Yeah, I mean it's conversation. So whomever's got the good one. I do want to make a big shout out. I've been looking at the people attending here, and big shout out to all the people from soundgirls.org that have joined us. If you have any questions, send us our way. Here's one that's to me, I guess it's a little bit, it's not as prevalent as it once was with digital desk, but I think it still is important. Pre or post fade for mixing monitors?
Ooh.
I'll just go around the block on this.
I'll take a little bit of this. I tend to do a little bit of both, depending on how you want to set your board out, how you want to have, if you want to have access to things quickly. Obviously on a digital console now, you can pretty much assign any fader to be anything you want. So if you want to run a lead vocal into a VCA and always have that at your fingertips, then you would, stick that into pre-fade, so you can grab it without affecting anyone else's mix. But I mean, most channels on one of my mixes, most channels would be post-fade, with the odd exception, which would usually be because I'm trying to do something on a VCA, or if there's a particular reason, maybe for something like a reverb send or anything like that, where you don't want to be altering the volume levels to reverbs if you want them consistent.
Okay. Alex?
Yeah, on my current gig, I, for various reasons, have decided to send all my artists faders post-fade to groups, so that I've just got all of my bits in front of me in a small place, really, so that I don't have to flick through a load of banks. But obviously that means that all of the rest of the band have got to be pre-fade, so that I'm not altering their mixes. So it depends on what I'm doing and how I want it to behave as to how I'll have it pre or post. Like Chopper said, reverb sends and bits and pieces that you don't want to change the send level to. You can do different things to make it work for you, but obviously thinking about all of the mixes you're doing rather than just in a generalization.
Okay. Andre?
I'm definitely a post-fade guy, but I do pre-fade on somebody who don't needs a whole lot. If there's like a guitar player or keyboardist who don't needs a whole lot and a whole lot of attention, I definitely do pre-fade and post-fade for everybody else, especially the main act or singer, whoever that may be. Help me control their mix a whole lot easier.
Okay. Let's see, Landon.
I think understand like that. Like we're all kind of dancing around the same explanation. Is I think understanding the pros and cons of certain channels and the benefits of doing that. Like I think channels that you absolutely should be post fader, like guest vocal channels, things that can come out at a level you don't expect. Maybe a DJ input or something on a local level. At a festival situation, things that can surprise you that you need to grab quickly and affect everybody on stage at the same time. That can be super helpful, especially when you're trying to do things quickly. I actually, on this last tour, this isn't really pre-post fader thing, but I was experimenting with duplicating channels and having the primary musician having their channel compressed having their channel not affected for their mix, and then having a duplicate channel that was either slightly compressed to limit the dynamic range of that instrument so that their primary instrument sticks out in their mix, but the duplicated channel that everybody else gets is limited in dynamic range a little bit, and or sent to a group like drums, and then like that kind of just evening out those little transients so that their primary instrument sticks out compared to everything else that you're sending. And it gave me really good results. I had a lot of fun with that. But yeah, I would say as far as quickiness and readiness on things, just think through what you need to grab quickly to affect everybody on stage for either safety or just surprised. Oh, I need to fix that quickly. Understanding the pros and cons of that.
That makes sense. How about you, Brad?
Landon pretty much touched on my philosophy on it too. On tour, I tend to run the band on pre-fader, and then I'll run the artist either post-fader or on the main fader mix, so I can use VCAs. On festival kind of stuff, I lean more toward all post-fader to have VCA set up. So I have an all vocal VCA, I have an all instrument VCA, so that way I can make changes quickly on the fly. If I'm hearing feedback, I can just turn all the vocals down a little bit in all the mixes, and that can clean things up quickly. I also will do a kind of hybrid thing where, let's say I have 3 people who want me to ride the guitar solo for them. Well, then I'll set that to post fader so I can ride the guitar solo on a VCA for everybody. It's mostly for me all about being able to use VCAs. I don't really go to the main fader to make the changes, but I'll do a lot of stuff with VCAs.
Okay, yeah. So it's the general consensus is problem channels and things that can give you some headaches. You put post fade in a lot of cases. Okay, Brad, I'm going to stick with you on this one because I know you have wedges specifically on your principal. And this is going away from IEMS for a second. What's the correct way for EQing wedges to reduce feedback? Do you do the wedge send, or are you doing the vocal channel?
I do a little bit of both, and I also, because I'm on a big digital console, I can use another workflow too. But for small things, I'll try and get the big feedback out on the channel, because we don't want to EQ the wedge so much that we take all the frequencies out for the instruments too. So what I'll start by doing is getting the wedge to sound right with music. I'll just play something off my phone, just like if you were doing a PA. I'll make the wedge sound good for music, and then I'll try to get as much out on the channel EQ of the vocals first. And then if I have to take more out of the wedge overall for the room or for more feedback, and it depends on expectations of how loud people want it to be too. But I try to not take it all out of the wedge unless I'm just trying to get it done fast, and I'll just grab the graphic EQ if I'm trying to go real fast. On my show for Blake, I have the band for him on the main left and right, and then I run his vocal and all of the guest vocals that go to the wedge on one group. So that way I can EQ the group, which affects all the vocals going to the wedges, so I don't have to ring out every vocal mic because I use the same capsule for all the guest vocals. So it makes it quick and easy for me to get to where I'm going, and I will ring it out and get all the feedback out that I can, because especially with those guest vocals, I don't know what people are going to do in the wedges. And then I sum it all together in a matrix. So I'll take the group back into the matrix with the band mix for Blake. And that way I keep the band nice and flat, and I can do a little group compression and even, and they're not going through a wedge that's completely EQ'd to death.
Makes a lot of sense. Anyone else comment on that one?
For Summer Walker, I do a little bit of the same thing but instead of music, I use pink noise per se. And she don't use in-ears at all. So I use pink noise per wedge, per venue, and just take what the ambience of the room is giving me and clean the wedge up first. I never really change her mic EQ per se, because that's the way that she likes it sound, the sound of the microphone tone. So I always try to reconfirm the wedge to make it sit at a loud enough level that it doesn't feedback without even changing her microphone EQ or gain.
Okay, very good.
I think there's small things you can do, like if you're grabbing a bunch of 31 bands in the same area or all high end, it could be a quick change of just turning that high amp channel down a couple clicks, and then giving yourself those frequencies back in, especially if you have two wedges butted up that are summing in a certain way that's acting funny. Or I think I do that with a lot of things. Like when you start making changes a bunch, all in the same frequency range or all in the same channel, you start asking yourself, am I doing something that's causing this, or am I fixing this the wrong way?
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Let's see. I've got a quite interesting question, and I'm going to try to get it right here. This is from one of our guests, Simon Lord. So if I mess this up, send us some messages. We're trying to read a bunch of things as we go, but this is coming from a different aspect. This is from a broadcast perspective. It's a sound engineer that's trying to service the guest performers while also giving them the talk back from multiple sources and program sound on a TV show. And he's looking for a good way to separate some of these sources from what the talent performance is, and he doesn't have the option to do it with stereo panning. So basically what I'm imagining here is that you've got a talent on a TV show. They've got the stage managers and the directors and program sound coming in, and they're trying to figure out the best way to separate those sources, keep them where they're intelligible, but don't mess with the rest of the mix. Any ideas on that one?
Are we talking about talkback, like chatter that's going on in your head, or are we talking about?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Talk back from multiple sources and program sound.
I think it comes down. I know on this last arena tour I did, I had a tour radio tied into my console. I have multiple talkbacks on stage. I had wireless comm with the stage manager. I had a bunch of stuff going on. I think that's where panning is your friend, and also understanding ways that you can matrix things into your solo bus. I mean, for a monitor guy, I'm not sure about a broadcast perspective, but when you can matrix things on top of your solo bus and have the ability to turn those on and off if it's distracting or not. There's a, I have a kill switch and a macro that if I'm having trouble doing my job, I can kill that and tell, if in my situation I have a tech that, hey, can you punch into the mix and tell me if anybody needs anything? That way I'm still able to do my job. But if not, I would explore panning things hard left, hard right in a predictable manner that, okay, hard right is my stage manager. If he needs me, he's over here. And if this is over here, that's, so you understand who's talking to you. I run into that with my band guys on stage. I have them panned in a certain way that I know who's reaching out to me if I'm distracted. Predictability and consistency is the name of the game in that situation for me anyways.
Great. Any other comments there?
I'll throw a little quick one in, because I think part of the question was that it was in mono, right? And they weren't able to do,
It was in mono, yes.
Panning would be your friend in that situation. Another thing that you can do, going back to what was just said about matrixing back onto buses or onto mixes, something we're doing on the current tour with chat mics. So I've got the entire band, I've got chat mics, and then we've got all the text dotted around the arena or whatever, stage managers and various people. Sometimes it's really difficult to get any sort of intelligibility out of what's coming into your head while you've got music playing and the band's in full flow. So we set ourselves up a little macro on the desk that ducks the PFL bus. So you set the threshold on a ducker. So when the chat channel comes in, it triggers the threshold, and then that ducks your mix that you're listening to. So it ducks your PFL bus by a certain percentage that lets you hear the chat that's coming in. And then when that finishes, obviously you drop back below the threshold and your mix comes back. If you get the threshold wrong, it's a little annoying and very distracting, but works really well once you get it all sort of dialed in.
That's a great idea. Absolutely.
On some consoles too, you can make the master fader your solo level. And so any talkbacks that are matrix on top of that solo level, if you grab your if you grab your master fader down, you're still hearing your talkbacks that are matrix on top of that, but your send from your solo bus is all the way down. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're having trouble hearing over the music, you can yank that master fader down, the master fader, which is your solo bus level down, and you're still hearing whatever's matrix on top of that. That's been super helpful for me.
Very nice. Andy, I know you've been looking at questions. We're passing this back and forth, so I'm going to give it back to you.
It is. Thank you, guys. There's been, 128 questions. I've tried to sum them up and pull them together. There's a lot of people asking about theatre. Just so you know, we are doing a theatre masterclass in a few weeks, so look out for that one. So I'm going to leave all the theatre questions for now. But just to jump away from the tech for a little bit, someone is asking, for those of you who've done front of house or monitors or different roles, why monitors? Why have you decided to specialize in monitors? What is it that floats your boat about monitors? And whoever wants to go first, or I'll pick someone. Chopper, you're smiling.
Go on, yeah, I'll go. I've done a little bit of both. I'm 99% a monitor guy these days for sure. I think you just find your. I think you find your niche. I'm very good technically. I'm not really a musician. I mean, I understand music. I understand the technicalities of music. So for me to approach audio mixing, it's more of a technical approach as it is to trying to recreate, the album sound for everyone to listen to. So that's kind of one aspect to it. And then, you've got a whole different vibe when you're down on the stage with a band. If you've got a really great band, you've got a whole vibe going down during the gig, the interactions between you and the artist and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's a lot more fun down the side of the stage. there's considerable pressure to go with it sometimes, but it can be a lot of fun if you're with the right artist.
Yeah, I agree. Does anyone else want to jump in on that one?
From my
Go on, Andre.
from my angle, I look at it as it's easier for me to please 10 people than please 25,000. So I would definitely take pleasing 10 people over 25,000.
And the manager as well. Alex?
I was going to say I find the issues you have at front of house that you can have at front of house are just not as enjoyable to fix. You know, you're standing in front of house at a festival and all of a sudden all your HF goes because of the wind. It's like stuff like that just defeats me, and I don't want to deal with those kind of issues. It's just more, I find it more fun to be on stage. I don't like the bits that you'd have to deal with at front of house. And as you say, various people's opinions that you can't really change, whereas your one-to-one individual conversations with the artists you work with, there you can do something about that because you have individual control over what you're doing with that one person, whereas you don't with the audience or managers or whoever else may want to give you your opinion.
It's a great answer. Anyone else? Brad or Landon?
Yeah, I'll say that I'm a reluctant front of house engineer. I feel like with in-ear monitors, especially, and wedges too, I can always get it to sound like it sounds like in my head. Whereas when I'm doing front of house, especially when room acoustics come into play, bad room acoustics come into play, a lot of times when I'm doing front of house, I can't ever get it to sound like I want it to sound. And I also fight with myself over loudness. Like, I'll look at my SPL meter. Whenever I do front of house, I'll have an SPL meter. I'll look down, I'm like, whoa, 105. Well, how did that happen? And so I always feel like I'm just fighting with myself when I'm doing front of house. And I just like the instantaneous nature of doing in-ears. Like, you make a change and it happens and it's there, and it's, for me, more predictable.
Right. Landon, anything to add to that?
I enjoy the psychological side of really getting into somebody's head and understanding just simple things like body language of that guy is going to look like, you can tell when a problem's going to happen before it even happens because, oh, that guy is standing differently and he's looking like he doesn't even know he has a problem yet, but he doesn't look comfortable. And after either through over time relationships of getting to know that person, or like that, making 10 people happy on stage is a completely different challenge and has its own set of politics than being out front and having somebody tell you how it should sound. I don't necessarily have any ego when it comes to what I'm sending that person, as long as they're happy and as long as they're not making bad decisions that's going to affect not only what they can hear but what I'm sending them. And if it is, then we can have a conversation about it. It's such a different service industry when it's one-on-one conversation about how can I help you hear what you need to hear to perform at your highest level. It's so gratifying when you build that trust and that relationship with somebody, whether it's an artist or a band member.
That's great. So let's keep with that theme then. So let's talk about the artists and how you deal with those. So is it essential to always be available to the artist at the whole time, or do some of you have to monitor via watching a screen because it's in an arena and you're watching the broadcast feed? Or let's talk a little bit about how you deal and try and make yourself available for the artist and deal with that situation. So let's go. Do you want to go, Andre?
I think with me, if it's not a direct path that they can't see me, I always try to keep talkbacks available for them to use to get to me. And like, there was a tour that I did where I was literally under the stage. And there was always a shot from a camera shot that a guy was in the pit on a camera shot. So I always told the artist, if ever you need me and you don't want to go to the talkback mic, we had different signals for different things. So he would always just signal in that shot. And that was a shot on my screen constantly.
Great. And anyone else? How would you make yourself available for the artist the best you can?
I'll jump in if you like. I mean, I've done both. I'm a big believer in having the best outline you can get to an artist. I mean, you can do it via a TV screen. I've mixed shows where I've had an array of screens. I think the problem with having screens as opposed to a direct line of sight is that you can miss a lot of the subtle signs, like Landon was saying earlier on. You know, once you've worked with an artist for a while, you can sense when something's wrong or when they need something, and you can sort of you can get to the point where you can preempt. You know what their mix usually sounds like. You can read the body language. You can have fixed. You can have made the adjustment before they've even had time to turn around and communicate to you. And I think that that in itself is a really valuable thing. I'm just being able to learn and read people's body language. So I'm a big believer in direct line of sight for sure, wherever possible. Not always possible, but.
Does anyone want to add to that, or can I add a little bit into that of talking about signals? I
think there are situations that you get thrown into, whether it's a TV show or a festival like Coachella or whatever, where you're behind a video wall. Maybe it's not even a set design for an arena that's affecting you. It's the situation you're in. Developing small not body language, small hand signals, real subtle stuff like like putting your hand on your chest and you're pointing certain things. You don't even need to point up or down. If you point at the guitar, I know you need more of it. Little things like that in a situation that you can't control, like a Saturday Night Live or some kind of situation that you're not even the engineer in charge, you're somebody that's a liaison. You can pick out those things out very quickly, and it's kind of a dialogue that y'all develop over time of making them as comfortable as they can be in a situation that maybe both of you are out of your own control.
Yeah, Alex.
Just to add to what Chopper said, I find myself with no sight lines regularly, which is not ideal, but I try and get a specific camera sent to me, which is a wide shot, basically from where stage left would be. So I can try and add a bit more of what I normally would be seeing, so that the artist can still do those little hand movements or whatever that we normally would do if I could see each other, knowing that I can still see her, and that's what I look at, if it's all possible. But ideally, yeah, you just need to be able to see them because it just makes life easier.
Yeah. Brad, anything to add to that?
Oh, I've worked for a variety of artists. I've worked for artists who insist that I'm within sight lines because we have a whole playbook of hand signals, not just level changes, but EQ changes, reverb changes.
Can
but
you give us an example?
Oh yeah, I mean, just all kinds of, this means more mid-range, this means more highs. I mean, pretty crazy stuff that we had going on with him, and he insisted I was within sight lines. He wouldn't do a show if he couldn't see me. But more recently, Blake is very trusting. He trusts me to do whatever he needs to do. So he doesn't care if he can't see me at all. If he needs something, it won't be major. He can whisper it to his tech, and then his tech can tell me what he needs. And then the band is all on talkback mics, so they can communicate with me that way if they can't see me.
That's great. So that leads us to another question that came in quite a while ago, sorry, but there is, someone is asking about, once the mix is set for the artist, do you generally tinker with it or do what you think is right, or do you kind of set it and wait for the artist to ask? I know, and then there was also, as a bolt onto that question, is anyone using scenes or snapshots or whatever brand of console you use?
So I can jump back in. I can jump back in there.
Yeah.
Well, I'll start with scenes. I have a scene for every song that he's ever done. So I have over 100, a scene for every song he's ever done. So I have over 100 scenes I could pull up. The scenes do so many things that I don't know what happens. I hit the next button and the band is happy. I don't really know. And I know if I don't hit the button, they're not happy. So I find it to be helpful if you are touring with a band to be able to do that. But it depends. I mean, if it's a real simple arrangement with a 4-piece rock band, you might not need it. And then what was the other question?
So would you change anything on the fly? So would you wait for the artist to lead and ask for the change, or would you perhaps think actually they could do with a bit more guitar here?
Right. Well, I would say that, again, it depends. Some artists say set it and leave it. And that's how Blake was when I first started with him, but that's not how I am. I have to be making changes. So I'll write guitar solos for him. I also like to make the mix where I have the rhythm and then maybe one pitch reference at a time. Like if there's 3 guitars playing power chords, I'll try to just give him one, because in wedges it can really get loud and messy if you have too much going on. So I do tend to bring things in and out for him. If I didn't, would he notice or care? I'm not sure. But it keeps me busy and it keeps me focused on the music and listening for problems. It would get real boring if I was just sitting there, I think.
Yeah. Chopper, I saw you smiling away there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm the same way as Brad. I have a scene for every song, like the Duran Duran show file. I don't know, it's hundreds of scenes, like crazy amounts. And again, when you've got that many scenes and you've got that many people on stage and that many inputs, there's no way to track what's in a scene. You lose all knowledge of what's going on. When you used to mix on an analog console back in the old days, your brain took a map of that console, and I could walk up to an analog desk at a festival and dial it pretty much from memory. I would have a cheat sheet, but you would make those adjustments. But when you've got so much stuff going on now on a digital desk, there's no way to keep up. You can't. There's layers and layers and layers of stuff. It's bad enough trying to remember what layer everything's on, never mind what you did for each individual person in each song. As far as making adjustments go, I think that goes back to a little bit back to my previous answer, where I think for my artists, I would say like 85% of the stuff is just once it's set and we're good, and you're a week or 10 days into a tour, most things don't get changed. The things that I am changing are if something pops into your head and you're like, oh, that sounds weird in this song, or that sounds wrong, or that sounds broken, then you would go and have a look at that and maybe change it. Or then reading an artist's body language again. If someone looks unsettled, then you need to have a look at what's going on in their mix and have a listen and then make an adjustment. I think if you can, I like to be preemptive if I can be. I would definitely, but that said, I wouldn't be making like massive musical changes on anyone's mixes once they're set and happy.
Does anyone want to add to that?
I think the scariest moment for us is when the downbeat happens of the first song, seeing how it's all going to kind of lay with their vocal. And on this last arena tour, I had some success with having I called it like an all minus V. So your lead singer, you have an all every pre-fader send to a DCA, and then so when they come out of the gate, depending on how hard or quiet they're going to sing that night, on top of girl screaming and arena reverberance and all that stuff, you can kind of feather their whole mix without changing their vocal level to them and get it to sit right, and then go from there, depending on what the room's doing, depending on how the crowd's screaming, all that kind of stuff, and make them as comfortable as you can quickly to make your job easier and make that anxiety of like, how is this going to go for that crazy first song of scrambling to kind of get things to 8 people on stage looking at you if things are wrong. You can kind of get that to within a couple of millimeters of movement of a couple faders get everybody to be like, oh, okay, you know, this is different from sound check, but I can deal with this, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever their reaction might be.
Does anyone want to add to that one before we jump onto the last topic? No. So we are getting loads and loads of questions about compression. Where do you use it? Do you use it on vocals? Do you use it on mix buses? And also reverbs. We'll throw that one in there as well. People asking a lot about compression and reverbs. So I think that'll probably take us to the end of the session because that's quite a huge topic. Who wants to jump in first with that one? Is that Brand Andre? Are you signaling there? Oh, sorry, Alex. There you go.
Starting with reverbs, I like to stick reverbs on a lot of things to kind of give different layers of depth to different instruments, guitars, keyboards, more and less to do individual members. So the guitarist, generally, I find they don't want any reverb on it. But if other people, just to push it a little bit further back in their mix, but without doing EQ or volume changes, it works quite well. As far as compression goes, it's kind of like, A, does it need it? Does the dynamic range need to be reduced? Or B, would you be doing it for a tonal thing on input channels? Certainly. Certainly instruments that the musician has the ability to create a large dynamic range, I'd certainly put compression on it. Just, you know, you don't want a singer who sings maybe quietly normally with the mic quite far back suddenly coming in really loud and deafening everybody on stage. I also like to be careful of what I'm sending to my transmitters, keeping the dynamic range of the really high frequency stuff and the really low frequency stuff in check, so that you don't start damaging your radio transmission by overloading it in a volume sense, but with specific frequencies, which tend to be the top and tail of the audio spectrum. Oh yeah.
Great answer. Who wants to jump on next?
I'll jump in if you want.
Go on then, Chops.
Compression is your best friend and your worst enemy, I think, is your answer there. Using compression and not knowing what you're doing with it, I think you can run the potential of just destroying everything that you've previously created within a mix. I think you need to, touching on what Alex just said, I think you need to understand, as far as in-ears go, you need to understand what's happening to your mix when it hits the transmitter, and what happens to that audio signal when it gets to the receiver and then gets uncompanded and gets sent to a set of in-ears. Controlling dynamic range by means of compression into a transmitter, I'm a big fan of, and I always use multiband compression for that. So you can catch, like Alex was just saying, you can catch high-end peaks or low-end peaks, which take a lot of transmission range up, and just keep them under check, because otherwise you can end up with a massive amount of low frequency hitting the transmitter, taking all the power out of it, and you just lose the whole thing. So I mean, compression for me is about controlling dynamic range. So you've got the end result where you've got the dynamic range into the transmitter, but then you have to construct a mix. I mean, you could do a whole session on this. The way you build a mix and keep as much natural dynamic range within that mix so that you can hear what's going on is down to a judicial use of compression and understanding what and what isn't going to leap out. It's not about just slamming everything flat so that if you slam everything with a compressor and just squash it to bits, you're never going to hear anything that you're doing. So when I'm creating a mix, I'm trying to keep it as natural sounding as I can. A band wants to have fun when they're playing. It doesn't want to be, Radio 1 squashed. It needs to be. It needs to have some sort of naturality about it, and a lot of the way you achieve that is by judicious compression on various bits and pieces of the mix.
I think, to add to what the guys say, for me, I use compression on inputs and outputs just to keep the full dynamic range together. And I use the verb for spatial issues to help me create more space in my mix. And with saying that, sometimes a lot of people over compress and change the whole tonality of whatever instrument they're compressing per se. And then they start running into another set of issues trying to fix something else that is now taking the space of, where if you release some of that compression, it fixes itself. And that's my take on compression.
Landon or Brad?
I think I grab for EQ first. I especially going back to what Chopper said earlier, of these armatures are traveling down plastic tubes that are millimeters from our ears, and so we're very susceptible to certain frequencies. And I will, coming from being a systems guy and knowing what certain front of house guys will just put air on everything, because they're having that transmission loss from hundreds of feet through the PA and on top of people in the crowd. So that's a habit that some people are into. And then you get on our side of the snake. And to me, I high pass and low pass everything to save bandwidth on the transmitter, but also to save fatigue of the ears and really carve out windows of what is this competing with, and how can I limit that window to not compete? Kick drum, bass drum, is it panning them differently so that the kick drum is just slightly in one ear and the bass drum, the bass guitar is slightly in the other, and give them unique characteristics of frequency range. And it'll open up your whole mix if you really think, I think that's something I neglected when I was younger, of really looking at that chart of different instruments and seeing what frequency range they take up, and knowing that 200 to 400 is a really delicate area for most channels to stack up in frequencies. And what frequencies can I get rid of above 10K or even 8K and above to get, and in our situation, there's crowd noise on top of that. There's natural ambience that's going to add that air to it anyways. So what can I do to save ear fatigue and frequencies, both transmission and those armatures? It doesn't take much for them just to excite little tiny transients or frequencies. If you can get rid of that on the EQ side, you're not having to just layer stuff on top to fix the wrong problem.
That's a great answer. And finally, Brad, and then we're going to hand back to Tim.
Sure. Everybody kind of touched on a lot of my philosophies. I'll say with regards to compression, I use it a lot for transient shaping. If we have a snare drum that's this big, but it really just needs to be this big in the mix, just to give the time reference, we don't need to be taking up an entire beat with all the sustain that it has. So I use compression for that kind of stuff. On outputs, I use very little, just compression, just to act as glue to kind of put the whole mix together. And then as far as reverb goes, with modern country music, we're really going across a lot of genres. We're going from classic country, where we have delicate finger pick guitars, to rock country with strumming guitars. So I'll use it to kind of make sure everybody can hear what they're doing at all times, whether they're playing gently or playing hard, just things like that. I'm very light on compression on vocals. I find a lot of singers just don't like it. If they get loud, they want to get loud. I will put a limiter if on my lead singer, if he tends to scream in between songs, I'll put a limiter on, but most of the time when he's singing, it won't even be near that limiter.
Fantastic. Well, that is the end of the session. I'm going to pass back to Tim to close up, but I just want to say thank you so much. When I was a monitor guy, it's quite a lonely experience. You never because it's just you listening in and the band, so it's quite difficult to kind of get other people's take on things. So thank you guys. I know this has been incredible for a lot of people. So yeah, over to Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say to everyone watching up that's not a panelist that's watching this, thank you for all the questions. I really wish we could have hit every one of them now. We're going to try to export this list of questions and look for some commonality. And I'll hit the panelist here. Maybe we hit you guys with an email with some of these questions and we can build a response after the fact. It's really a lot of great questions. 90 minutes is it's a long time, but it's tough to get 154 questions in. So for those of you we didn't get to, we'll try to figure something out to get back to you there. I want to say thanks to everyone here, Chopper and Alex and Landon and Andre and Brad. Thanks for joining us. Andy, thanks for being the co-host on this. David, who's got the Sound Academy logo in the background, thanks for all the background help. It's been great. We're going to have one of these every Tuesday for the next few weeks at least, maybe a little bit more depending on things. But again, thanks for joining us at the Don't Stop the Education series here by Sennheiser Sound Academy, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.